Welcome to the Define.It Webinar presented by Business and Decision Life Sciences. I'm Stephen Bamford and I'll be moderating this webinar. Our speakers today are Anne-Sophie Beck, Senior Project Manager at Business Decision Life Sciences, and Peter van Roozel, Chief Operating Officer at Business Decision Life Sciences. Both are industry experts in CDIS data standards. A few technical notes before we start. If you can't view the screen, drag the bottom right-hand corner of the window to enlarge it. During the presentation, there will be a short poll. Just follow the on-screen instructions. There will be a question and answer session following the presentation. You can ask questions using the box on the right-hand side of the screen. At the end of the session, you will be sent a feedback form. Feedback is important to us at BDLS, and it will help us when organizing future webinars. Finally, if you have any questions throughout the session, please do enter them in the system, and we'll hold that at the question and answer at the end. Define.xml is the standard for providing metadata for FDA submissions, since it's the most suitable machine-readable format for metadata. Today, we're going to speak more about Define.xml and what BDLS has been doing to help companies produce the correct files and documentation. I'd now like to hand over to Anne-Sophie, who will talk you through the presentation.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome everyone to this Define.It demo webinar. So thank you much for joining us, and we're looking forward to presenting our new tool to you. So we're going to just give you a short presentation first on the history of Define.xml and what led BDLS to create its Define.It tool. We will then give you a short demo of the tool and present the different versions of it that are available. And we will then have a short Q&A session at the end. So first of all, the history of Define.xml. Now, as some of you may know, Define.xml was first released by CDIS back in 2005 as version 1. Now, in March of last year, a second version, 2.0, was released for use in FDA submissions. Now, at BDLS, as a CRO, when we first started SDTM conversion projects all the way back in 2007, a Define.xml was to be created as part of the FDA submission package. Indeed, it is a deliverable for any conversion project that you may undertake. Now, at the time when we started doing this, there were no commercial tools available to generate this type of document. And BDLS created its own in-house program to generate Define.xml version 1 and Define.pdf from a metadata repository within a SAS DI Studio environment. Now, this tool has worked very well for the past 7 years and still continues to perform competently today. However, the Define.xml has greater potential than to be used for a submission only. First of all, it contains the 5 levels of metadata that make up the study metadata, and building a metadata library or repository will allow all this metadata to be used for building a database. Indeed, we've seen that Define.xml can be used firstly to improve study design, also to standardize metadata between CROs, vendors, and sponsors. It can also be checked against the database structure and content, so it can be used to validate. And it is, of course, a document part of any FDA submission. So in the recent years, BDLS has noticed that sponsors are increasingly moving toward a metadata-based approach of data collection and then ultimately conversion to SDTM. In addition to all of this, in March 2013, CDIS released Define version 2.0, in which the metadata submission model was extensively refined in response to implementation experience with version 1, the evolution of the SDTM and ADAM standards, and also best practices by SDTM and ADAM metadata experts. Key changes to the model compared to version 1 include enhanced documentation with the SDTM and ADAM covered by multiple examples, a flexible definition of value level metadata, updates to XML namespacing, improved handling of comments, and better support for split domains. In addition to all of this, the FDA has made a recent announcement that they will develop guidance for the industry on the use of the CDISC standard for electronic submissions. They have also put out an official release that they will be accepting Define.XML version 2 as of August 15, 2013. Now, of course, Define.XML version 1.0 is still accepted for any FDA submission, and no date of support end has been put into their data standards catalog yet. Now, in view of all of the above, BDLS decided to create the Define.It tool, which is an easy way of generating Define.XML version 1 and Define.XML version 2 from study specifications. In addition, it can also convert define files into study specifications. Now, the way in which it works is that the tool reads in metadata specifications in an Excel format, loads them into a metadata repository, and applies SAS ODS statements to generate the Define.XML. So, now that we've given you a bit of history about Define and about the tool and how it works, we shall proceed with the demo.
Before we do the demo, when Anne-Sophie's getting ready, we've just got a very, very short poll just to see how people are using Define.It now. So hopefully on the screen now in front of you, you should be able to see a very quick poll. Are you using Define 1 or Define 2 within your company? If you can just quickly in the next few seconds just select one of the two, one of the four items here. We'll just give it 10 more seconds and then we'll show you the results. We've got 3 questions in total. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So unfortunately for the 15% of people who might be on the wrong call, the majority of people are still using Define 1. Okay, let's move on to question 2. If you're using Define 1, do you plan to upgrade to Define 2? So, no you don't. You do within 1 year, 2 years, or sometime in the next 5 years. So just give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and show the results of that one. So most people, if they're not already using Define 2, the people on Define 1, half of them are going to be upgrading within the next 12 months. Okay, one final question here. How long does it currently take you to complete the Define.XML process? Does it take less than 10 hours of resource? Between 10 and 20 hours of resource? Between 20 hours and 40 hours of resource, or over 40 hours of resource? So I'm going to just give it a few more seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the results of the final poll here are a bit more mixed. About a third of the people can do it in about half a week, but just over a third, almost half the people, it takes over a week at the moment to produce a Define.XML. So thank you very much for taking part in that short poll. And we're now going to pass back over to Anne-Sophie, who's going to do the demo.
All right. So as you can see, the tool is up and running. So it's a very simple tool. There's only 4 buttons. The 2 on the left are used to upload metadata specifications. The 2 on the right are used to upload Define.XML. The first thing I'll do is just show you an example of some metadata specifications so you get an idea of the type of information needed to produce the Define.XML via this tool. So If we open the metadata specifications for a version 1, you will see that there is an instructions tab, firstly, to give you an idea and give you instructions on how to complete the subsequent tabs. Now, the first thing is, of course, the table metadata, as the define.xml will contain your metadata on all levels. So it's very easy to complete with your domains, their descriptions, class, structure, keys, etc. We've also got a sheet for variable metadata. So this sheet will really contain every single, for example, SDTM domain you would like to include, with all the variables, whether there is a code list attached, their origin, what CRF page it is annotated on, if the origin is CRF, and any comments you may want to provide at the variable level. So this is, for example, an AE domain. Value level metadata will be all your test codes and tests needed in your define.xml. So in this example, we have, for example, the value level metadata for your vital signs domain with their test codes, test, origins, CRF page, and again, you can add control terminology at the value level, metadata level, and comments. The code list metadata tab will contain all the code lists that are to be presented in your define.xml. So, for example, for your AE, you will have an ACN code list to present your actions taken when an adverse event occurs. Then we've got a computational algorithms tab, where you can specify all the computational algorithms used in your metadata. And finally, we have an XML parameters table, which will provide the real XML information needed to populate headers and footers within your define.xml and create hyperlinks to external documents. All of this is very nicely explained in the instructions tabs to guide you into completing all the rest. So, if we go back to the tool, I can click here to upload metadata version 1 specifications, as it says when you put the mouse on it. So if you click there, you can select your specifications, open them. You'll see the little wheel running as it's uploading your metadata specifications into the repository, and voila, you have a green light indicating that the upload was successful. Now you'll see that the rest has been grayed out because you cannot generate a Define 2.0 from specifications 1.0 due to all the enhanced functionalities in the Define 2.0 that I mentioned in my presentation. However, we can download our Define 1.0, and we simply have to click here to download our Define, and again you will see the wheel turning while the program is running, and right now it is downloading the generated define.xml as a zip file. Now you have to save this zip file, and in order to view your Define, you do have to extract it. So I will simply extract the Define. There it is. And voila, we have a define.xml version 1.0. As you can see, with all the information at the table level, below the information at the variable level. If I click on a hyperlink for the ARM code, it will take me down to the value level metadata for the ARM code. And here, for example, is a code list with a hyperlink. If I click on that, it will take me down to the code list. And here you will see the dictionaries we've also used. So it contains the metadata at the 5 different levels. So that was generating a Define version 1. I'm going to refresh the tool now, and you do that simply by clicking on the wheel in the middle, and that refreshes it, and it's ready to be used again. So I will first show you the metadata specifications version 2. Let me just delete. All right. So same principle. You will see an instructions tab that can guide you through the completion of all the subsequent tabs. Now, because the metadata specifications of version 2 are slightly more complex, I won't go through each and every single tab individually because that would take quite a while, but I will try my best to show as much as possible in the time that I have. So it's the same principle again as in the Define 1.0. We have to complete our table metadata, but as mentioned before, there is a better handling of comments. So for example, now you can add comments as well at the table level, and the metadata specifications are built for this, so that you can also put in all the functionalities of a Define 2.0. We mentioned also better support for split domains, which you can observe here in this QS domain, which has been split into 3 separate domains based on category. At the variable level, you will see that it's pretty much the same thing as in Define 1.0, but again, there's a lot of additional information that you can provide. It will still contain all your variable names for your AE and your variable labels, but you can assign them an order number, you can assign them a mandatory yes or no, you can specify keys here now rather than at the table level and just put a number in there for their order. You've still got your origin and your CRF page that you can complete, but you can also assign now, for example, a data type, a length, any significant digits that might be present on the variable if the type is a float, those type of things. So those are the variables metadata for Define 2.0. At the value level metadata, it's quite different because, as you may know, in Define 2.0, there is enhanced flexibility for value level metadata, and it can be assigned to multiple variables now. Also, test codes and tests are now present as code lists, and the value level metadata is attached to the variable its values represent. So, for example, you will see here now that the QS test codes are all assigned to the ORES because that is what they refer to an actual result. So this is the value level metadata. It's a bit more complex, but it's still very much doable. For the code list metadata, there again, some additional information has to be completed because in the Define 2.0 you have the opportunity to put in the actual control terminology code for each and every one of your code lists. So accommodations had to be made to be able to put in that type of information. But again, it's a listing of all the code lists that will be used in your Define. Like, for example, your frequency here, it's all the codes that you can use. Computational algorithms, there it's not much different. You've just got a list of all the computational algorithms that will be used throughout your Define 2.0. And then the next tabs are extra tabs, let's say, compared to Define 1.0. We've got a comments tab because, as I mentioned, there's better support now for comments, so they can be attached to any level of metadata, which also means they are referenced throughout your metadata specifications. Rather than copying the same comment over and over and over again, we simply reference its location in this tab, and the program will automatically insert the appropriate comment in the Define. We also need to specify the ODM version, and all these next tabs are to complete your headers and footers and hyperlinks to additional documentation. Now, if you remember from the So those are the metadata specifications of a Define 2.0, and we can now proceed with loading them into the system. Again, it's very simple. You simply click here to upload the metadata specifications. The tool loads them into the metadata repository. As you can see, the wheel turning. Now, for a Define 2.0, it does always take a little bit longer than the Define 1.0 because there is more information to upload, simply. And there we have a green light. So the upload was successful. Now you will see here that the Define 1.0 was not grayed out, as was the case when we uploaded metadata specifications version 1. You could not generate a Define 2.0. This is because the metadata specifications 2.0 contain all the information necessary to make a Define 1.0, so it will work if you want to create a Define 1.0. But right now, we will go and download our generated Define.xml version 2.0. And this is being downloaded again as a zip file, as was done for the first Define. So I will save it. Now I will first delete the other ones just to ensure we don't have duplicates. I will extract it here. And we've got a Define 2.0. As you can see, you've got again your metadata at the table level, now with comments and with support for split domains, as you can see here. If you click on one of the hyperlinks, it will take you down to the metadata at the variable level, where you will still see all your variables with their labels and their keys. You will also see all the control terminology that is related to it. So if we click on one of these, it will take us down to the controlled terminology for our A severity, for example. Maybe just to show you the value level metadata, as this is slightly different. Now you will see that the value level metadata is attached to the variable result, VS ORAS, so that you know that it is VS test code equals diastolic blood pressure for certain results. The same is true for the result units, where you can specify for a test code, for example, and a country, a specific unit. And this allows the Define 2.0 to be used to take really slices out of your metadata and show, for example, only the metadata for the height measurements in Mexico and Canada. And then you will see that all those height measurements were done in centimeters just in that slice, compared to the height measurements done in the USA, which will be in inches, for example. So that's a Define 2.0. Now I will refresh the tool again. Now, as I mentioned, you can also do the reverse. You can generate from a Define.xml metadata specifications. So if we upload a Define version 1 by clicking on the button on the right, open it, and this gets loaded into the system very quickly. We have a green light, so that means the upload was successful, and we can actually download the generated version 1 metadata specifications. Save them. Here they are. And we've got an Excel file, again, with all the tabs, as you can see, containing all the metadata for the Define version 1 that we uploaded. So you'll see that it contains everything at the table level. Now some formatting may be required here, but you'll see that it contains the data set, the description, class structure, purpose keys, and whether an XBT link was present in that define.xml that we uploaded. And the same is true for the variables, the values, the code lists, the computational algorithms, etc. So I will just delete some of these things to avoid duplications. And again, it works as well for uploading a Define version 2 and downloading metadata specifications. So I will quickly show you that. So green light, the upload was successful, and we can download the generated version 2 specifications. Save. And we once again have an Excel file containing all the metadata at the different levels. Again, some formatting may be required, but you will still have the domain names, whether it's a repeating variable, whether it's reference data, the structure, the purpose, any comments that might be attached, or the comment reference in any case, etc. And the same is true at all the levels of metadata. The sheets are completed with what was present in the define.xml that you uploaded. So that was the tool. Now, if you would try, for example, to upload a Define where you're supposed to upload metadata specifications, let's give that a try. It will immediately give you an error and tell you that only XLS or XLSX documents are allowed. So it does try to guide you through the process of creating your Define. So that's it for the demo of the tool. I will pass the hand to Peter van Russel.
Okay, great. Sophie, thanks a lot. Much appreciated. I think you did a great job. So, as you could all have seen, it's a very simple tool on the one hand, but on the other hand, it is solving a number of, I would say, a complex problem. This metadata in the Define 1, but also Define 2, it is quite complex how to put it in there. What we're trying to provide you on the one hand is we want to give you a framework, a very simple Excel file, but still a place where to put your metadata on the one hand. But then the process is very simple. We simply push a button and a Define 2 or a Define 1 comes rolling out. Yeah? And also providing the functionality where we can also take a Define and put that information back into a metadata sheet. That's something we wanted to put in there. So even though it's a simple tool, we do believe that we're trying to help the industry out there. Yeah. So what does it do? As you can see, it can generate a Define version 1 and a version 2 from metadata specifications from two separate specification sheets in Excel. It can, in fact, if you follow the steps, convert the Define version 2 to Define version 1. If you do that, you could. It can also convert define version 1 and a version 2 into metadata specification, and that's typically something that you would use when, for example, you're a sponsor and your CRO is sending you define XML, but basically you want to have a deeper look or you want to start playing with the metadata in there. And that's something that this tool will do out of the box. Yeah. So a number of benefits. What does Define provide? It will generate a Define version 1 and a Define version 2 that is fully CDISC compliant. So you can send this to the FDA and it will pass their test, I would say. Yeah? So tools will run on that. It's a proven technology. It's simple technology, I would say. It is SAS and XML based. Yeah, it's very user friendly, as you could see. There is not too much you can do wrong. However, it does have a lot of. So basically, the smart part of Define XML is really in the middle. It's that macro which will read metadata and will, I would say, output metadata on the other hand. As you could see, with this Define.It tool, we're running that from an Excel sheet. However, we are assuming that most of you are not working with Excel sheets, that some of you will be, for example, reading this information straight from their datasets or from a specification repository or from a metadata repository. And Define.It is very customizable for that. So the only thing we would really need to change is the way how we're importing that metadata. A little bit about the versions, okay? So what you've seen just now is a standalone desktop version, and there's good news, it is free. Yeah, it is free. We're going to launch it out there. Yeah, we're going to launch it, and everybody can use it. It is a standalone desktop edition. It will run on a desktop, which runs SAS for PC. Yeah, it will not run on SAS or file servers, and it's really intended for use by a single user. Yeah, so that's where the difference is. So the standalone desktop version is to be used by, I would say, single individuals who have SAS running on their desktop. But from the moment that you really want to use it in I would say, in a more robust environment, in an enterprise edition, I would say, where you need to run this tool on a SAS server and a file server, that's where we basically are offering the enterprise version. And that's where you really need to contact us, because for that part, for the enterprise version, we will charge, of course. Yeah. You could compare this model to the open CDISC model. Yeah, of course. Some of you may have figured that out already. Pricing will be based on the server license, a number of end users, number of studies, implementation and validation services required. So basically, we can integrate this tool with any technology out there. Any customization is also possible. So please do contact us for that. We have a number of things in our minds for potential future functionalities. You could call this a roadmap. What are we going to add to Define.It? We are intending, because basically the demo that Anne-Sophie has shown you, it's all about SETM. You could see the SETM metadata. What you didn't see just yet is the ADAM metadata, or even the analysis results metadata. And that's something that we will enhance the tool with. So we will also be creating such a specification sheet, which will also hold the ADAM metadata and eventually the analysis results metadata, so we can also generate a Define XML for that. What this tool doesn't do right now is a define file structure validation functionality. And what we really mean by that, if you feed the tool, or when we are reading a Define XML, whether it's a version 1 or a version 2, if we read that, the tool is assuming that this is a well-formed Define XML file. If something is wrong with the file, the tool will simply say it's not okay. Yeah, but it will not give you an advanced analysis of what is wrong in that XML file. And that's something that we may add in the future, to also start scanning, I would say, the validity of that Define XML structure. Other nice to haves in there, a selection of the domains you want to report in Define XML. It's possible that you only want to see a Define XML, for example, for your DM and your AE table. That's something that we will be able to subselect. Another thing is, if you have already created a large number of specifications in version 1, as you could see in version 2, the metadata specifications are slightly more complex. In order to just, I would say, use that functionality, we would like to pre-populate wherever possible the metadata specifications version 2, so you don't have to type it over or start copying and pasting. Another thing is, we know that some companies, whenever they're going to create a Define.XML, I would say at the end of their process, they would really start with doing what we call a proc contents. Basically, they're going to look at the existing structure of their data sets, and they will start creating a Define.XML from that. When you think about it, that's something that the tool could also do. So give it a folder with data sets in there, and we will scan it, and we will basically pull as much of the metadata as possible from the structure and even the content in there to put in the metadata specification. So additional nice to have functionality. What about the metadata coming from CDISC and control terminology? Well, short term, we are thinking added the possibility to read the CDISC sheets with control terminology in there. Longer term, we may even use a share, CDISC share, that from the moment that share from CDISC is going to be consumable, we might as well reach out to it and connect to it and read the metadata from that environment. So that's something that's on the roadmap. Over here, and that's also something that you're going to be able to, I would say, compare on the Define.It website. We're going to talk about that in a short second. You can see a brief comparison. So I believe that most of you, very short term, are going to be interested in the desktop version, and I would say go for it. It is free, it's out there, so please download it and use it and give us feedback. But do be aware that the Enterprise Edition has quite a lot of more functionality, and the Enterprise Edition is more something that you would use, I would say, in a robust environment. Yeah. So other examples of differences between the, I would say, the light and free desktop version and the more robust Enterprise version. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Q&A. I think we're getting there.